And what you'll see in it is our slums brilliantly photographed in black and white. How we lived then. 5 kids to a bed, no lab, no bath, mildew running down the walls. We'd no unemployment then. But the wages you'll hear in this film, they were terrible. Wages not fit for a dog. Homes not fit for a pig. When this film was made, nearly 25 years ago, the Tenants Association I was chairman of tried to stop it being shown. My committee felt the media were using us, exhibiting our poverty for all to see. But within months of this film, all the families you'll see were rehoused, and St Anne's has been rebuilt quite well, with low-rise houses, because of the pressure we all kept up. The film was well watched. It's a strong film, maybe because it focuses just on the poverty. It is amazing how we lived then, in what passed for homes. It's changed for the better, only because we all did pull in our ways to make it change. But a long time ago, 1969,
St Anne's, Nottingham, a damp winter morning. Peter, Mark and David Marriott, Anthony and Evelyn, 11. The children don't sleep well. Sometimes they fall asleep at school.
The house was very damp and very cold, because you could have a fire up the chimney back, and the back of the house was freezing.
If the house were less damp, the attic might be pressed into service as a 3rd bedroom, but it has a hole in the roof big enough for a man to climb through. The house has no bathroom, no running hot water, no lavatory indoors, and no proper place to store food.
I have 2 children that suffer with bronchial asthma, and it's the matter of, we'll say, 4 weeks since Anthony, he came out of hospital with it. The oldest girl is 11. She has to sleep in the same bedroom as 4 boys, and the oldest boy is 10. I mean, any day, nature could take its part on her, and she's going to be in a terrible mess when she gets out of bed, with the 4 boys in the same bedroom as her. I mean, she's a well-developed girl for an 11. She knows all about the facts of life and everything. The children's clothes, when you fetch them out the kitchen, you've got to stand there airing them off before they can even put them on, because they're damp. You can't keep nothing at all. Everything's mildewed that's left in that kitchen. You can't keep any food in the cupboard. You can go out there now and smell that cupboard. It's mildew. Well, if you buy a loaf of bread this morning, and I want to use it tomorrow morning, you could smell all fusting off it. You couldn't possibly use it. Even cornflakes, they go soggy. The only thing you can save is tin stuff, which we don't use a lot of. You see, I buy it fresh every day from the butchers, the greengrocers, or whatever we need. But it means I have to go shopping in the morning to get my husband's dinner in for him to cook at night when he comes home. And I've also got to go shopping on my way home from work to buy something for the supper. I mean, it costs you far more to nip to these little shops to buy, say, a quarter tea and a pound of sugar than it would to go to one of these supermarkets and buy the whole rations for a week.
Better get off.
The house is owned by the council. Repairs are slow.
There hasn't been a toilet for 6 weeks, and the corporation know this, but they're just not doing nothing about it. They say you've got to be another 2 years, but in 2 years there'll be no house left. We'll be living in the middle of the road. We might as well live there now, anyway. Because it is damn hard work, I'll tell you, having to boil every drop of water you need.
I mean, some people would say you must make more of an effort, you must find a better place to live, you must sort of...
Well, just let anybody say that to me and I'll ask them to go and find me one and I'll go and live in it. That's my answer to them.
Where would she find it? In St. Anne's there are 10,000 houses, all small, all old, decaying together. 30,000 people live here in half a square mile, 5 minutes from the centre of Nottingham. It is 3 times as crowded as the rest of the city. Some of the problems of St. Anne's are apparent enough. But people are not starving, not in rags, not sleeping in the open. It's difficult to realise to what extent many people are deprived of things everyone else takes for granted. The surface is unrevealing. But we know more about this area than other similar ones. Researchers from the University of Nottingham have studied it closely.
Poverty isn't a thing that you're either in or not in. Districts like this constantly verging on poverty. The individual people are sometimes above and sometimes below the line that researchers from outside might come in and call poverty. And it takes the form of a life cycle. You may well be born in poverty. That's to say, if you're the 2nd or 3rd child, not the 5th or 6th, but the 2nd or 3rd, you may well arrive in a family whose budget is now so stretched and whose means are so small that they'd be better off on public relief. Good. You grow up, you leave school, and you go to work. And at that point, you take yourself and the family above the line, because there are now the incomes of all the children coming into the house. And then you get married, and after you've had your 1st or 2nd child, you find yourself dipping again below the line, where you stay for a generation, a school generation, until your children take you out above the line again, until you go back down for good when you retire and become a pensioner.
Morning, ladies. Good morning. Let Annie come in. Come on, Annie. Come on.
They must put a terrible amount of hours in because it's such tedious work. You see, sometimes you get good work, sometimes it's very dree. And the drear it is, the harder they have to sit at it. You get a good walk, they can earn 30 bob a day at least. Get a bad one, take you a month to earn 30 shillings.
Nottingham's most famous trade is lace. What these women are doing is to separate the lace into thin strips for the hems of, say, petticoats. The lace has been woven in one piece, and these women are separating it into strips by drawing out the thread or warp that holds them together. A machine would be more expensive.
See, the lace varies, and they have to take the good with the bad. Around here, we're living in the poorer class of people, and they live for the lace. Take the lace off them, they wouldn't last long. They're too old to go out to work. They're past cleaning jobs. There's nothing that they could do. But apparently half of them have been brought up by their mothers and the grandmothers that did it before them. They were taught by the grandmothers, and it was very hard work in those days. If you took the work off them, it would be just like taking the right hand off.
Some women prefer to do the same work at home. It isn't only pensioners who need this work. Pat Smith and her husband have 2 young children and would find it very difficult to make ends meet without her long hours at the lace.
How much will you get for that lace work, and how long will it take you?
Well, it varies, but this piece will take me between 3.5 hours to 4 hours. And they're 3 shilling a dozen breadths. And there are 3 dozen, so I shall get 9 shilling.
And will it normally take you 3 to 4 hours, or may it take you shorter or longer?
The work varies as you get it. If it's been overdressed, the threads are harder to pull out. And if the work's softer, they're easier. So it could take me, well, up to 12 hours to do the same amount of work.
And you get more money then?
Oh, no. When you take the work on, you know this. No matter how many hours it took you, you'd still get the same amount of money.
So you might still get 9 shillings for 12 hours work?
Oh, yes.
How much on an average week would you make?
Well, at the most, I'd make about £3 to £4. But if you've got a poor week, you can earn as little as 30 shillings.
Could you manage without doing the lace?
I have stopped on the odd occasion if I've been ill, but you feel the pinch straight away because you've been used to it.
How much does your husband earn?
His full week is £12.10, but he comes home with about £11 after that.
That's £12.10 and then...
His stoppages.
Of this £11, 50 shillings goes in rent for a house with no bath and an outdoor lavatory. The house is very damp, but because they've worked hard, it doesn't look it.
No, because my husband's put wood on the walls. But behind there, it's green and very damp.
Does that mean you have to have a lot of fires?
In this room, yes, you should have a fire continually. In the front room, you can't afford to have a coal fire in both rooms. And the furniture just goes green with mould. But the little boy suffers with bronchitis terribly. And, you know, infections of the ears and that, through the damp.
Are they doing well at school?
Yes, they're average. But the schools are a bit overcrowded.
Did they stay to school dinner?
No, I'm afraid there's not room for them. They can't cope with the amount of meals. There's no way to sit the children. So they have to deal with the very needy cases, people who are on assistance. And I've got quite a few children in the family. Well, they have to see to those first.
So if yours had, some other child might have to go without, I suppose?
Well, they would. They'd be deprived, whereas I could give them a meal if they came home.
Do you think, on the whole, you're better or worse off than most of the people around?
Well, I don't know. In some cases where people are on relief or assistance, they're drawing more than my husband is going to work, which is annoying. But my husband would sooner take a job for £10 a week than go on the assistance or the dole.
Do you think it's fairly widespread round here that people just can't live on the wage that the man brings home?
Well, there's a lot of cases, yes.
A surprisingly large section of the poor are not casualties of the welfare state, of the kind everybody expects to find among the poor, by which I mean the old people who are on their own, or the deserted mothers or the sick. Those categories people expect to find among the poor. The thing that shocked us when we collected our statistics was the very large proportion of poor people who are working a full week, often in very onerous, arduous jobs, and who earn for a full week's work less than they would be able to draw if they drew public relief. And a very large proportion indeed of the poor people in this area live in families where the breadwinner is working against odds in this sort of way.
In many trades, the basic rate is nowhere near a living wage. Jeff Churchill works making kitchen units.
I earn £11 a week for 40 hours flat week, and I get every night till 7 o'clock. That's time and a quarter. And Saturday mornings, you do 4 hours, but you get paid for 6.
So Jeff, for a 52-hour week, takes home at most £14 to support his wife and 2 children. In trades like woodworking, wages have always been low. Even with overtime, they can only live on £14 if they're very careful.
You can manage fairly well most weeks, but if you get caught for a bill, you've got to miss something to pay it. And you've got to do as much overtime as you can then to try and straighten the rest up.
He married his wife, Kath, 4 years ago when she was 16.
There's a good boy.
I expect him to go out to work all the while, but not overtime every night. And the kiddies go to bed about 5:30, 6 o'clock. I've got to sit till 7:30 all on my own, waiting for him coming home. And it seems days, you know, it don't just seem a couple of hours. And I do like to be with him.
I'm going to feed the pigeons. Hey? All right.
£14 a week for 4 people means that Jeff and Kath are proportionately about as well off as an old-age pensioner living only on his pension.
On the money that Jeff is bringing home, how does your budget work out?
I have about £4.10 a week for food.
And that's for how many of you? That's
4 of us, because Mandy don't have bottles now because she's nearly 3. And Jeff only comes home for 1 meal a day, that is night time. Through the week I have a casserole on a Monday with Sunday's leftover meat. And on a Tuesday I do chips, egg and beans. A Wednesday we have sausage, potatoes and greens. On a Thursday we probably have chips again. And then on Friday we probably have beans on toast, beans and egg on toast. Or tomatoes on toast, you know, something like that. Until Jeff comes home on Friday night with his wages.
What are your other main expenses?
My coal. I have 2 bags a week and that's 11 shillings a bag. And sometimes if I run out I have to buy a pre-packed. Well, that's 3 and 6 for a small bag. Well, if I fetch 2 of those, that's 7 shillings gone. And I'm more or less every week run out of coal, so I have to go and fetch 1 or 2. And there's my light and my gas. My gas does because I'm always boiling to wash. I was boiling the water on the gas.
What about clothes?
Well, I do have a few things new, but a lot of things my sister passes down to me, because she always has expensive clothes, and she wears them probably 6 or 7 times, and then passes them on to me.
What about the things you're wearing now?
My jumper cost 1 and 6. My mother bought it me from a second-hand shop, well, from a lady who sold second-hand clothes. My skirt my sister gave me, and all my underwear my mother bought me as birthday and Christmas presents.
There are second-hand clothes shops in nearly every street. They do good business in cast-off dresses and suits of the recently dead.
How much is that Thompson lighter?
Which one, love? Now, that's one to match the other one, love, Dave. Now, you should have those because I haven't got any the other day. I think was there some of those without the buttons on?
Yeah, there was the tiles.
Yeah. Look, that's too small, darling, now. Look, that's only...
Yeah. You got one of them and it's shrunk from it.
Yeah, must be a bad washing then, darling, if they're shrinking. Prams, cribs, new baby clothes, even their own children's clothes and etc. and etc. Men's trousers, men's working shoes, boots. Take a winter coat like this. Winter coat like this. Naturally, there's no buttons on, but if I have time to do it myself, I put the buttons on. That's a good winter coat. Now, I'd charge 10 shillings for that. Curtains, they're not really good quality curtains, but they're better than some curtains that people do have, you know. Now, that, obviously, nobody won't want that to put up to the window, unless they're very, very poor. So what they do, a lot of children that they have got, they cover a settee or 2 easy chairs or something to make the room look respectable. Do that. Now, that pair, I charge about £4 pair for that. Now then, a mod dress, that. Good. Quite nice for a young girl, that one. About 7 6. That one, wool dresses, there. Good wool dress, £10. And knitted down, dress there, lovely for a little girl there, 5 shilling.
You get a lot of children coming in, very
yes.
badly clothed, very badly shoed.
Well, you get some children well clothed, well looked after, and the parents want to do the best for the children. Sometimes they don't bother with themselves. Another time they feel that they need a new coat themselves. So if they come in for a coat themselves, or perhaps underwear, even bra, panties, anything like that, shoes, naturally they want it as cheap as they can get it. They want about 5 shillings a limit for a pair of ladies' shoes. Good quality shoes for children they don't mind. A good pair for about 5 shillings or even 7 shillings. But if they're almost new or something like that, 10 shillings. Now, they don't mind that because children's shoes are going to be about, well, £2, £2.5, anything like that. They last them 3 months, no good. So, obviously, they come here to see if they can get a pair for about £5, 4 or £5.
Can I have 30 bob this, please?
Before the war, there were 40 pawn shops in Nottingham. Today, there are still 5. 2 of them are in St Anne's.
You've had it before many a time.
Oh, yeah.
There are fewer regular customers and fewer pledges, but between them, the 2 shops may still take 500 pledges in a week. The mechanics of the transaction are still the same. 28 and 10p received, 30 shillings to be repaid in a month. But the pledges themselves have changed.
Nowadays, I mean, it's mostly watches, jewellery, and gents, good quality suits. In the old days, I mean, it hardly used to be the old man's shirt to the old woman's shimmy. We used to have a queue outside at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. And when you arrived at the shop, there'd probably be about 20 people or so waiting for you to open.
Poverty in the 60s is a difficult thing to talk about and a difficult thing to express very clearly because you must understand that we're talking about something different from poverty 100 years ago. Or we're talking something quite different from poverty in, say, India or Africa today. That poverty does not express itself in children running around barefoot or people starving to death. What we mean by poverty is the share that you have of the sort of goods and commodities which everybody else takes for granted. That if you live in a society where, as a matter of course, people have leather shoes on their feet, but your children have plastic shoes on their feet, then those children are relatively deprived, they're relatively poor. If you live in a street where everybody has a television set, and a new television set, and you have either no television set or an old television set or an inefficient television set, then you are relatively poor. It's changed from now as compared with before the war, and poverty today is different from what poverty will be in 10 or 15 years' time. So when we talk about people being poor, this must be clearly understood what we are saying, that here we are dealing with people who, in a relatively rich society, get the dirty end of the stick. These are the people at the bottom of the pile. These are the withouts in our society.
The Victoria Wash House.
I can remember when it used to be open on a Saturday morning. I used to have to go and save a place for my mother in the queue. The sinks and the racks haven't changed at all. They've always been like that. The only thing that's changed is them 12 machines that run down the middle. It's handy for me. It's handy for anybody with 7 kids, and it's cheaper too. If you go to the Bendix, it costs too much. But it would do for me anyway.
Nottingham is well supplied with laundrettes that do the work for you. But the wash house costs 1 shilling an hour instead of about 3 shillings at the laundrette.
I like to wash my own, rub them, punch them, put them in the boil, leave them cold till it's ready to boil, and then when I've done all my other washing, he said, fetch my whites out, and that's how I'll go on.
Of course, the younger women prefer to go to the laundrette when they can afford it. And of course, for the older ones, the wash house has become part of their way of life. They've got used to the hard work, and they're grateful for the company. They will feel a sense of loss if it's pulled down.
When we have a cup of tea about just after 4. And then when it's all dried, you see, we go on the ironer, pay a penny like, and till you've finished.
Of the 30,000 people who live in St Anne's, about 8,000 are children. Their schools try to give them glimpses of a different world.
Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. Well, of course, we do find certain difficulties with some of these children that wouldn't be apparent in other areas, but I would like to make it quite clear that any difficulties we do find apply to only a certain proportion of these children and not to all. We do have children from very nice homes where the background is completely satisfactory. Regarding the difficulties, we do have the odd one who's not toilet trained. We find little puddles on the floor which need to be wiped up, and we have those that are sick, of course, and that has to be dealt with. We do have to keep a supply of odd pants and these things that need to be applied when we've had an accident. We find communications quite difficult. These mothers in crowded circumstances must find it very difficult after they've bathed the family in a tin bath, which has to be kept on an outside wall and has to be filled with water from the copper or from a saucepan. They can't have much energy or enthusiasm for a bedtime story or even a communication at child level, and this we find is quite difficult. We have to establish a relationship before we can start at all. We try to give these children emotional security and establish a contact between teacher and child, and any teacher who can write in her daily report, "Today William smiled at me," has probably achieved as much as a teacher who could write, "Today Johnny did 5 pages of sums." We sometimes find their imaginative play quite lacking. You can listen into their conversation and find that a lot of their expression comes from their home circumstances. They'll be the mother and they'll look after their little ones, but their experiences are so few that they don't know how to expand. We find their imaginative writing quite inhibited, and we really have to slog away at this one and provide them with situations, the fairy stories, and we read poems to them and put them into imaginary situations and discuss this one and encourage their imagination in this way. We provide them with a lot of the community play toys and things that they can use where they wouldn't really have space in their own homes to use these things. Sometimes we find little girls and little boys are quite a long time in the toilet, and when we go to investigate, we find that they're just sitting there, and we think perhaps this is a place where they go to be quiet. It's a nice little house where they can shut the door and be entirely alone, and I think this is perhaps the reason why they stay there. They have to be encouraged to come out and told that this is not the most desirable of places in which to meditate. We were quite horrified on one occasion when we went out to find they had never seen sheep or cows or horses. They were amazed at the trees. We once combed the school and took to the seaside everybody who hadn't been. This was quite an experience. When we put them on the sand, they wanted to know who'd made it, who put it there, where did it come from, how deep it was, what you did with it, what was it made of, what was all that water, what could you do with that?
St. Anne's is coming down. Or rather, its demolition is planned over the next 7 years. After that, it will be redeveloped. At first sight, this seems the answer to all the problems. But it's not that straightforward. Some residents resent this drastic solution and feel that officials are only interested in the housing problem and not the other needs of the community. Or they regret the destruction of a neighbourhood with a strong identity. Anyway, redevelopment does not happen overnight. Life is going to be even more hazardous for the people who have got to go on living here. And people are always going to need not just houses, but cheap houses.
The fact of the matter is that in this area, a large number of people will feel the pressure to look for cheap housing. And what that's going to mean is pretty obvious. You're knocking down 10,000 cheap houses in this area. So, assuming that a large proportion of the people who live in those houses still want cheap houses, they will go and look for them where they happen to be. And that will mean that you don't solve the housing problem, that you move it. that you shift it to the next major slum area, which becomes more overcrowded because there's less cheap accommodation available and more pressure upon it. And so rents will go up in slum districts in the rest of the city, houses will become tenements, they'll be subdivided, and the problem will appear again in a sharper form.
You see, the rents around here are still fairly low. That you can rent a house here for 25 shillings a week or something like that. The council houses that will go up, the rents will start at about £3 a week, anything up to 5 or 6. Now, quite clearly, for many of the families who are finding it difficult to get by in an area like this, paying 25 bob, it's quite out of the question that they're going to be able to afford the new council house rents unless they're prepared to take a staggering cut in their living standards, a cut which may be quite impossible for some of them. They just haven't got that sort of margin of expenditure.
2 and 11, please. Thank you. Thank you. Draw.
Kath and Jeff Churchill don't live in St Anne's because they like the area. They live here because the rent is low. Most young people get out if they can. Kath and her husband are trapped. On £14 a week, they already have to buy second-hand clothes and struggle to survive. £2 or £3 more on the rent is simply beyond them. So they put up with the appalling conditions. And they keep papering the walls.
Once you've put it on, it's coming up again. I mean, it's falling off more or less in your hand as you're putting it on.
Inside about 3 months, it'll be wet through in parts.
Because the paste, what you put it on with, it never dries at the bottom at all.
Amanda's cried all day.
You've always got something to complain about, haven't you?
No. I don't always complain.
What do you think are your best times, the things that you enjoy despite all the problems?
Well, we used to enjoy going to a dance at Clifton, but they closed that because it got smashed up.
My best time is when the children have gone to bed, you know, we sit together on the settee and just watch the telly, and all the troubles just don't seem to be there anymore. When Jeff's home, I feel ever so safe, you know. Nothing can harm me when he's in the house, but when he's out, I feel lost and, you know, all alone. I'd sit and wait for him coming home at night, you know, says I've got somebody with me. They do get very lonely.
When there was a report published about this area, one of the papers put a headline, television in 90% of, quote, poverty homes, as though it was not really possible to be hard up if you had a television.
Well, we were married 3 years. We've only had that television 14 months.
We didn't have a television when we first got married.
We've had that television 14 months and we've been married 4 years.
We had that because we was bored and there was nothing else to do really at all. I mean, when you've been used to one living at a time, I mean, everybody's gone. When you've been used to one living at a time, you miss it. You say you don't, but you do.
Well, we don't go out. So what we would spend on going out, we pay for the television.
When you look at commercials on television or at what other people earn or have, does it upset you at all, or...?
No,
not on the television, but with my relatives. And my sister's house, you know, she's got a house like a palace. Lovely three-piece and...
It upsets you when you go up there and you come back.
And I go up there and then I come back here and I think, oh, Kath, fancy coming home to this. But it's home. And when I've been traipsing around town, I'm saying to myself, oh, Kath, be glad when I get home.
But when I've been somewhere like that, I don't want to come back.
What sort of things do you do as luxuries?
Well, I smoke. That's not sort of a luxury, that's just to steady my nerves, you know. But I sometimes have chocolates. Sometimes, very rare.
When did you take up smoking?
About 12 months ago.
Why?
And it's only with living here that's made me start smoking. My nerves were getting that bad that I needed something to bring me back down to earth, you know.
But smoking adds to your problems, actually, doesn't it?
Well, if I can't afford them, I just have to go without, but if I can afford them, well, I just buy them, you know. I don't smoke a lot, really, but I enjoy a cigarette. You know, at night when the kids have gone to bed and I sit down peaceful, I have a cigarette then. And if I get the kids get a bit hectic in the daytime, you know, I sit down then for 5 minutes and have a cigarette, just to steady me down.
Do you sometimes find things really get on top of you?
Sometimes I feel like I could just go out and get, you know, if I'd got the money, I'd go on a train and just go anywhere and not come back.
Why is that? Because of this house?
The house and the money, you know, and I just feel as though I just don't want to carry on anymore. You know, the house is small, it's damp and cold, and the things I'd like to have, you know, like buying some material and covering my three-piece and things like that I'd like to do, but the money just doesn't go that far, so I just can't do it.
Don't you think you ought to bring home more money to your wife?
Actually, yes, but... Well, I could do straight away, but... I've never felt like moving from where I am. I'm not the sort of person to run around and keep changing jobs. I never have been.
It's not only that, he's happy where he is. And I mean, if he changed his job and he goes somewhere else and he's not happy, it's going to upset all of us.
Can you foresee any way out? I mean, do you see this as going on for ever and ever, or do you think it's going to stop quite soon?
Well, my husband's in the syndicate at work in the football. There's always a chance that that might come up. I mean, they've won on it this year. We've got about 30 shillings each off of it. If it hadn't been so many draws, they'd have got, you know, a few pounds each. But otherwise, unless Jeff changed his job, which he doesn't want to do, is just carry on until probably the kiddies go to school and then I can go to work part-time while they're in school. But I'd have to get hours so that I'd be able to take them to school, come home for the dinner, and come home at night time at 3:30 for them to come home. Until then, it's just hopeless.
Do you sometimes resent having the kiddies?
No, never. I never resent having Mark and Mandy.
Even with the greater problems they cause?
Well, they're blessed. You know, if it weren't for the kids, I'd have gone a long while ago. You know, not saying I wouldn't leave Jeff, but I'd get on a train and I'd go. But with the kiddies, I can't. You know, I'd have probably end up in Mapley, you know, if I hadn't got the children. Because they sort of mental hospital.
It's a mental hospital.
Sorry. It's a mental hospital. You know, with my nerves, the kiddies, you know, they seem to make me realise that I've got something and I've got to hang on to it. And I just do. I just keep hanging on. And the children are all, and Jeff have all I've got, really.
None of the people in this film are drunkards or gamblers or misfits. They're not work-shy or wasteful. They're proud and don't particularly like to be told that they're among the poor. They work hard. And of course they've discovered ways of preserving their spirits. And demolishing St. Anne's alone is not going to be enough to solve their problems. There is a persistent myth that we are spending too much on the welfare state, and that if people are poor in Britain, it must be because of some moral failing. In St Anne's, the truth is clear. The housing problems in Nottingham are no worse than those of every major city in the country. Despite a national average wage of £23 a week, every industry has workers as badly paid as Jeff Churchill.
Bend your head down.
And despite increased family allowances, every town has deprived children.